Hello, my name is Rafi Wadan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Stargazr, and I would like to present a topic about how AI is changing the CFO's world. This presentation belongs to the track of emerging tech, and I'm happy that I can present this topic. The agenda for this presentation is split by two main objectives and two questions. The first one is how and especially where AI is applied in FP&A, and especially in the world of CFOs currently. Second question belongs to the topic of how we can see that the position of a CFO is evolving currently, especially his role, but also in terms of his team around of FP&A analysts for the future. My own background is coming from a position or two positions working for a company called Bayersdorf, 4 years as financial controller, but then afterwards also for a company called Lufthansa Technik, based in Germany, but also in Los Angeles, and worked there for nearly 2 years as well. Right now, I'm the co-founder of Stargazr, an AI-based cloud solution in the space of analytics and planning. Finished my PhD at the Technical University of Chemnitz and also at the UCLA in the area of digitization and management control. And the main topic was about how AI is changing the FP&A space. Some words to our solution at Stargazr, the AI-powered software, where we try to transform the FP&A and mainly focus on the beachhead of manufacturing. So we basically try to help manufacturing companies and especially their financial team in understanding their not only financial but also operational data much better. So we are super much in the area of decision making and mainly try to improve the time to make decision in any manufacturing company. We more or less show different bottlenecks in a company from the operation, but also on financial side, and basically can enable companies in saving millions in terms of dollar. So, but let's jump on the question where we find some specific applications of AI in FP&A. In terms of financial using of AI and also how this whole AI plays into the whole focus of CFOs, it's being said that for almost 5 or 6 years, we see a lot of ongoing trends and articles. There's one article mentioned from Weber and Schaefer, who basically mentioned that in the future, you don't need any controller or FP&A analyst. But also we see that especially in practical and industry literature, different articles and different trends that the CFO's role has to be think over and is definitely evolving. And that's why this kind of topic is right now super hot, since we know that all those technology advantage will have an impact on the FP&A role. But let's see where we can focus in this particular presentation. We basically try to focus on two areas of this kind of overview. It's mainly on the digital transfer strategy, which basically tries to cover also the role of finance. And in the other side, and that's basically covered by the second question, we want to see how the capabilities of people and mainly FP&A analysts and also CFOs are going to change. What kind of competencies they need to make sure to have after finishing universities and etc. And in general, when we talk about digital transformation in the standard term digitization, we have a different split. So we have the left and the right side, which basically means we can have a perspective from the technical side. And then basically we are talking about specific buzzwords as big data, predictive analytics, and other technologies as well. But on the other side, and that's also part of the CFO's role, there's a question, how is AI at the end of the day not only taking advantage of the technology, but also changing the type of business. So that means in types of business, we're talking about specific price models, we're talking about new competitors coming up, but also new potential customers. And to deep a bit, to dig a bit deeper in this whole kind of perspective, we need to have this kind of two different views. So on the left side, we see that AI and the entire digital transformation is on the one side, improving the processes and tasks, but on the other side, as I mentioned before, can bring up new business models. And in terms of new existing processes or new opportunities for processes, we definitely can always take this specific example, especially for finance team, and everyone would understand the standard monthly reporting. And we used to know that the standard monthly reporting used to take days or sometimes even weeks, and mainly was covered by filling out some Excel templates, checking some books, checking by the ERP system, and then sending Excels back and forth. How this kind of process is improved by AI is mainly that I can go in and can basically try to improve those processes and automate mainly those repetitive work. So that means that the entire process of a monthly reporting can be definitely be improved. But when we just also look on the other side and not only on existing processes, we see new business models. So let me just take an example. We have this standard industry with hotels. Hotels were more or less kind of overtaken by Airbnb. Why Airbnb? What kind of change does it have for finance, or especially for CFOs? It's a totally different structure of business. So for every finance guy or for every finance person in terms of uh, having a view on his own financial data, we see a different type. So on the one side, let's have a view on cash or like cash flow, or let's say even balance sheet here. So on the old traditional business as hotels were, we had like high assets. That means we need or companies needed to build those kind of hotels, which were more or less kind of ending up with high production cost. But if we go to the new approach with Airbnb, Airbnb does not exist with the model and saying we need to um, own areas and rooms. So Airbnb is a kind of a third party with low production cost or even like zero production cost, and just focus on taking a small stake of this kind of business. That means the revenue approach is super slow, but still it has way low risk. So let's take an example with the improvement of process and tasks. AI can help, and that's a standard P&L overview, and everyone would just love when they see this kind of overview, because this kind of P&L overview is something which is super common for the last 20 to 40 years. But it can definitely change with AI, because with AI we have the opportunity to not only focus with this kind of P&L view of internal data, which usually comes from any ERP source or something similar. Now we have also the opportunity through AI, no, more or less through big data, let's name it like this, to get an access to any external data. That means to fulfill and to make sure that this kind of P&L statement uh, fulfills all audits expectation, we can definitely also encourage additional data to make sure that we have a better visibility. Focusing on new business model, we can really take the example with the Volkswagen Group, who mainly said as a back in the middle of 2015 and giving a strategy for 2018, where they said we want as Volkswagen want to be the most successful and fascinating and sustainable automaker in the world. So the focus was super much on being an automaker. Now we see that especially big industries are evolving into a more, let's call it as Volkswagen was saying, wanted to be a globally leading provider of sustainable mobility. We see similar examples also with companies like Siemens. They turned from company which was originally built as a manufacturing company towards a more or less kind of software company. So those kind of two views are views a CFO, but also an FP&A in general has to work on and has to be improved. But let's focus more on those kind of three emerging AI technologies in general, especially those who are hitting the FP&A and finance world. We have on the left side robotic process automation, which is right now next to AI probably the hottest trend. And then obviously we have AI, which means in terms of finance or CFO world, um, buzzwords like predictive analytics, so trying to use data and going away from the historical retrospective perspective, but more towards forward-looking controlling. And then obviously as a requirement, using big data to more or less access much more data than companies used to have in the past. When it comes to the view of robotics, we have different perspectives. So on one side, especially those Excel gurus know that there were a lot of macros where companies were trying to basically automate some sales processes on a very low cost, mainly on Excel. That means duties like copy paste duties were kind of tried to be automated. On the next stage, there's the chance with robotic process automation, and there we are looking forward on definitely more general processes, and that can be filling out some formulas, that can be way above some copy and paste tasks, can be really something covering really sometimes even some month reporting and month-end closing processes. And that's something where the future will probably look on some ERP replacements for the future that through automation of any database layer, this kind of ERP database which we have right now can be significantly replaced. But when we have a look also on where this kind of RPI can be applied, we see, at least for now, for the last 5 years, that mainly in this accounting faced issues, that those kind of solution can be very beneficial. So let's assume accounts payable. Regards to accounts payable, which we have at 72%, it's RPA is mainly also used for travel expenses. So everything related to standard process where the human intervention was usually on a very low level. When we look a bit more down, where we have mainly nearly 0%, we have usually some transactional finance process or even operational process, meaning by where the finance guy needs to spend all of his mind in. And not to overthink that robots in general are not some walking or even talking Autobots. And it's not only about some existing machines or even some hardware. It's at the end of the day, there are some software, some computer coded softwares, and at the end of the day, it's just about trying to replace some repetitive rule-based tasks. So in general, to sum it up, when we talk about RPA, at the end of the day, RPA is trying to bring some benefits, especially in a way where we have some rule-based and repetitive work. In general, it's super important to avoid this kind of human error. And then basically, when we talk about some specific data, it's usually for a specific amount of mid to high volume, and especially of structured data. On the right side, we see some specific examples for providers. So I would even mention that Blue Prism, UiPath, WorkFusion, and even Automation Anywhere are like the leading providers when it comes to some RPA processes, not only for finance, but in general for finance. UiPath, for instance, is also focusing super much on improving processes on the manufacturing industry. Let's focus on the second trend right now in FP&A and finance. And this time I would call big data, because with big data we had a trend starting from actually 2011, 2012, so nearly 10 years, a huge focus on. Big data was kind of the hope for finance teams to be faster with data, so increase the volume, um, being able to have different type of data. So that means structured data, unstructured, semi-structured, etc. But not only the type of data structure, but also focusing also on external data. So focusing as well on different types of data. Um, and at the end of the day, we need to say that big data in general, I will call this also later with my study, is actually stagnating. So that means big data is right now seen as a requirement for all analytics and AI procedures and also robotic processes. Um, but in general, it's kind of a status given that this kind of machines are able or computers are able to run so much data. Focusing on big data in general by targets and chances, we can say that um, there are the abilities of reducing cost, using fast decision by real-time data, which definitely big data enables, since the amount of data can be applied in a real-time manner. And in general, everything related to better decision can be also associated with big data. On the other side, we are talking about there are definitely some mass individualization of services. That means how can we make sure that individual interactions with customer, for instance, are based on customer data, but also making sure that intelligent products can be used out of it. And focusing from big data onto the next level, which basically means trying to use AI. And that's a question, where can we try to use AI? When we see in this graph that, I mean, we covered the topic of processes, right? So using data, and at the end of the day, try to use this data out of making some useful information out of it. There's definitely the question, where's the area of FP&A? And we just marked it in a yellow area, where we say this is the focus on controlling. And that basically means making sure that we can use data from internal, but also not only for internal, but also for external, and try to use those data and make some information out of it that, yeah, at this time, usually the internal recipients, which are stakeholder management, etc., can make some decisions out of it. And we know all of those typical dashboards, which are common for the last at least 20 years. We see those kind of fancy one-pager where usually different types of data sets are trying to be changed to reports, and then usually are held in a one-pager. Those kind of dashboards are usually fancy, and then we're like super much seen as something which is like super digital. But at the end of the day, it's about decreasing complexity, and that's the main task of dashboard. And in my perspective, it not always works. But let's go let's step further and say, where did the whole analytics and AI actually start? And we know that in the time between 2000 and 2010, business intelligence was the big wave, right? So we had those kind of different opportunities of using reports, using ad hoc analysis, by accessing some data warehouses, which mainly were connected to some ERP or SCM tools, and those were super successful. But what really was missing in this part was a cloud-based solution. And that's where we can see basically here in the middle part, where, for instance, some data mining processes are coming in. While we are trying to move over and evolve to the next step in the whole BI and business analytics ladder, we can say that two big features are new in this time, are definitely new in. Firstly, we can say that we are not accessing anymore any internal ERP data, but also some external systems. Everything related to IoT, meaning by Internet of Things. That means maybe we can use some cyber physical data accesses, and basically, even as a finance team, we might be able to get a lot of information out of some machines and etc. from the manufacturing. The outcome out of it is that we firstly are able to have visual analytics, And on a second thing is trying to avoid this kind of retrospective view. So at the business intelligence view, we mainly had to focus backwards. So what happened years ago? What happened last month? With predictive and prescriptive, we're gonna change our focus towards the future. And that's basically pretty well showed in this overview. At the business intelligence, we had this part of, yeah, we call it descriptive and even sometimes diagnostic analytics. So I do descriptive analytics, and that's something what right now 75% of companies in the US, for instance, are still more or less kind of relying in their financial reporting is the focus backwards. So there's an issue in a company, and the report mentioned what happened in the last month. So it's basically the answer, hey, we lost 500K, and that's kind of the visibility. On the next stage, that's the task of the FP&A team is to dig deeper and try to understand, hey, what happened actually? Do we have some diagnostics? Do we find some? Can we detect some issues? And then mainly was the focus, hey, we can tell you that we lost 50K through, let's say, high materials cost. And even in this space, some business analytics feature can play in. The complexity will definitely increase, but also the value at the same time. But nowadays, we are in the area of predictive analytics, so where we say, hey, forget about what happened yesterday or last month. We have a look towards the end, and we will tell you that based on the latest trends, we are gonna lose 20K until the end. The biggest value, and that's something where in the year 2021 we are not yet there, but some startups are trying to work on this, is basically, and not only startups but also some major analytics companies is working on prescriptive analytics. And in this area, we mainly focus on trying to use machine learning as a machine learning model, which basically tells to the CFO or to the management what they should do in order to prevent some issues. So in this case, it will basically say, hey, we're gonna improve the production unit 4 by 3% to achieve our target. And the question is, using those kind of methods, there's definitely the question, on which kind of area can that be applied? So we definitely see four main areas, right? So analysis, forecasting, planning, reporting. What we can say is that definitely in the area of analysis and reporting, we see a high potential of AI. For the tasks of analysis, we definitely have those kind of scenario analysis and deviation, which usually happened also in the future, in the past, but now in the future, we have that kind of impact where we can use predictive analytics, where we can use prescriptive, but also some value driver models to make sure that the analysis is on the highest level. On the forecasting, we can use specific statistical methods and make sure that those kind of linear regressions or even some time series will work. At the planning area, we can use those kind of simulation models, but also when it comes to reporting, we have this kind of RPA, machine learning, but also some predictive analytics. But let's go over and try to apply it to a real case. That's and actually everyone from the finance world who used to work in the finance team will know that one of the most difficult tasks in a yearly manner of a finance team is the budget. Setting up the budget is super essential to make sure that the targets for the next year are set up in the right manner. But it also takes a lot of effort to make sure that the data quality is on the highest level and the goal is set up based on not only gut feeling, but also on a data-driven perspective. How this usually happens right now, or I would say within the last 20 years, was that finance team, and in this case, we call it controlling, is usually trying to steer this process by using historical data, and in this case, it's something about hours or some operational information, and trying to run this by the sales and engineering. And usually sales has the market view while engineering has the operational view. So at the end of the day, those both departments who are not very much associated with the financial perspective will decide based on gut feeling how to come up with the budget and how to come up with the targets. So at the end of the day, the controlling of finance team is just responsible for consolidation. On the next level, we are seeing some trends where we say the controlling department is able to inform and use data to make a data-driven decision. So they inform at the end of the day actually the sales engineering management about the latest trends, so that at the end of the day, those four areas can make a collaborated decision based on data insights, which means controlling understands the trends and can basically see what the market is asking for and what the company is actually able to fulfill. Let's go over to the next case, and that's kind of this kind of standard reporting process every month. Usually, in this case, again, an operation company, the controlling department usually uses some retrospective analytics and trying to understand what happened last month. This usual process takes an average 10 business days until the management gets the management report and can do some decisions. Once the management receives those reports, it will take usually some time, and then basically the next month is gonna start. What the future is, and that's something where those AI tools and predictive analytics tools can play in, is firstly they are able to to give some analysis in a real-time manner. And then the second thing, the controlling is able to jump always in. So once they have it in real time, they can interact with engineering, they can interact with management, and that's basically will mean that the time to make decision is decreased to solve problems on a daily manner. Just to name some analytics provider, and this time I have to mention that besides Jedox, which is our super common German company, Anaplan is maybe the most advanced company, but there are also some startups as Mosaic or even Stargazr focusing on improving the analytics and planning capabilities of companies. So just to sum it up in general, we can say that, and this is based on a survey of KPMG, surveying some CFOs, is we can assume that today, and this time it was actually 2017, automated real-time reports will be in 5 to 10 years in nearly 3 or 4 companies. Also, you're pretty sure that API technologies will lead definitely to automated financial processes. And the next thing is that the automated forecasts are based on big data and predictive analytics. So we have an overall common understanding that within the next 5 to 10 years, we could mainly say nearly 60 to 75% are definitely sure that this is those emerging technologies are the common technologies in finance teams. I would like to jump over and see what kind of impact it would have for CFOs and then definitely also for FP&A analysts. And then maybe we just go, some years back and just see how this kind of role of FP&A and finance teams is kind of evolving. So we have seen this kind of trend where I mentioned before that business analytics was the time where companies were doing a lot of analysis and also trying to report. And we see a trend of that the finance team is shifting more towards an interface between their own financial team, but also the management and also to some other stakeholders as operation. So when we move over, we can see that the finance team is not only preparing financial statements, but also definitely more involved in making decisions and even trying to tell stories. And I will validate those kind of infos and those kind of trends with my current study. And the question is where we're seeing some impact from the digitization or from the AI. And we can definitely circle all kind of tasks because AI will not only focus on presentation and storytelling, but also on data crunching, planning, analysis, and also reporting. At the end of the day, the impact for the finance guy is moving from being, as it was called in the past, bean counters towards a supporter in decision making. Let's assume a typical time of a financial analyst. Usually, we can say that before big data, the biggest time spent was mainly on data handling. The issue with big data right now, and that's why we see that big data is not only a help for finance teams, but can be also a critical point, is that it takes definitely more time to handle data. So the question is, how can we make sure that the analysis part, which loses nearly one hour, can be replaced? It can be taken even to a higher amount. It's basically that those kind of tools will try to focus on data handling, so that the finance guy is kind of encouraged to work more on business partnering experiments. That means at the end of the day, when we see a typical week, we can make sure, or the tools can make sure, that the finance team is spending less on data collection, can use his time to do more analysis, but at the end of the day, also be sure that they can focus on making decision-making interactions, and then basically also help in terms of strategic initiatives. And when we see what kind of tasks in general, I mentioned that before a bit, is that we basically, and this actually mirrors exactly what we mentioned before, is that it basically focus mainly on tasks where we have some repetitive tasks, where we definitely are not focused on transactional or strategic data. So to focus on different FP&A analysis types we have, or even CFO types we have, usually those kind of four overviews of four different roles. We have the service expert, who usually runs and coordinates all processes. We have the functional lead, who is super involved in the guidelines and also in the strategy. We have the scorekeeper, who usually carries the routine tasks, but also the guardian. So the question is, how will it look in the future? In the future, we have definitely at least twice so many roles. We have the change agent, who uses or actually drives all those change processes. We have the business partner, who is the critical guy working closely with the stakeholder. We have the decision scientist, who uses data science approaches and makes sure that all of those results can be moved over then to some initiatives. We have data scientists who are doing the analysis, and we have data engineers who are actually going one step back down to the IT world and trying actually to make sure that data quality, so when we're talking about garbage in, garbage out, is actually on the highest level. So let's have a look on where those kind of data scientists, what mainly are focusing on using data, applying some statistical methods, and make sure that the forward looking is kind of enabled, is kind of mm, it's kind of competitive to the business partner. So we see that especially when it comes to the financial and controlling, the business partner is the one who is asked probably, and who has actually the highest demand. Why? Because we can say that data scientists is in general someone who can be applied, or his method can be applied to different departments. So it's not only in finance and controlling. But when it comes to technology analysis, the business partner is someone who's not very helpful. So we'll be focused on the data scientist. On the other side, the data scientists won't have the deep business understanding what the business partner needs. So the business partner is still the one who understands fully the product, who understands fully the business, and is actually the one who is communicated with uh, his his personal skills, with qualities, and try to collaborate all of those information towards a story. And what we did in our research was, back in the days, was starting from 2014 and trying to understand how we see a replacement from all those technologies as RPA or AI on the role or on the density of finance persons. And we have seen that this kind of trend, which was mainly articulated by different articles, is not really seeing. So we still have a high density of controllers, even now at the COVID-19 time. We still have the demand of those kind of roles. But as I mentioned before, the big focus is making sure that decision making can be faced also when the amount of information is increasing. And based on this, we just want to dig deeper a bit about three different areas, and just show what kind of competencies we need, what kind of skill areas we need. So what we definitely can say is ERP system, that's a research based in Germany, where we have as a leading ERP system still SAP. We have still SAP as big system and an IT requirement for management accountants or even controller. On the other side, when we have a look on statistical programs, we definitely see a trend for systems like MATLAB, where we can basically um, play with financial modeling and also using SAS for the same analytics procedure. We see also in terms of program languages that languages as Java and Python are even more required. So that means we see in particular with financial job advertisements that those kind of keywords are even asked and demanded more. But when we have a look on those kind of analysis and those kind of job advertisements, we see that even big data technologies are or were increasing at that time. Same time, also we see an improvement of digitization automation. So we see that those kind of buzzwords are even appealing definitely more in those kind of job advertisements. But let's have a look on different specific tasks. We see that within the years, there's a decrease in those kind of tasks as analysis and planning. While when we have on the right side, even a focus on of tasks, or let's move even one slide further, we have those tasks as budget or decision. That means those kind of tasks will increase, and we see even for 2021 even a bigger increase. In terms of soft skills, we see that besides those kind of stuff like job experience or English skills, we have those three areas which are super important. Communication showed the biggest increase from 2014 to the future. So that means our study can really prove and validate that those kind of trends towards a business partner is kind of the leading trend for CFOs and also FP&A analysts. Same for the presentation skills. We have seen that tools like PowerPoint in general were still increasing even with new technologies. So to sum it up, we can say that the changing role of FP&A analysts or CFOs is mainly covered by those three areas. We have the technical part where we need more skill sets in terms of data warehouse programming, SQL, and even some new technologies. In terms of the statistical methods, we have those kind of overviews like predictive analytics, forecasting, but we see some sinking trend as planning and reporting. And in terms of soft skill, we will see a finance person who works as a business partner and can communicate with management and is way more involved in project management. To sum this presentation up, we can say that the FP&A area, the financial planning and analytics area, is mainly impacted by AI. But we have not to forget that on the one side, we are talking not only about the technologies, but also about business models. So the CFO is someone who is mainly responsible for rethinking different business types and how to shape the company doing and changing and driving the digital transformation. That means the CFO is, besides the top management or next to the top management, the responsible person to question the business model based on its data and make sure that the resources are allocated and the culture as well. On the other side, it's crucial to mention that all companies have right now an immense potential of using those automation tools in the corporate management. So that means from the shop floor down up to the management and reporting, those automation capabilities can be used. Important is to say that besides all capabilities, we see the strong demand, and that's something that can be mentioned also as an outlook for universities and potential graduates is that the importance of social skills is increasing. And that means basically the type of how to present and the type of how to communicate. So at the end of the day, the CFO must strengthen the analytical potential of the financial team, but also make sure that the social skills are not decreasing. I appreciate for your understanding, for your attention, and I would like to encourage with you for further discussion. Please ping me on rafi.wadan@stargazr.ai. If you're curious to read more about how AI is improving the financial world, please send me an email and get in touch with me. Thank you very much.